Been in dialogue for decades with United Church of Christ, and the only thing we did is they united their foreign missions together.
Okay.
We had the personnel and they had the money.
Gotta have both.
Ken Bryn again, Bishop Ken Bryn, and we're going to be working today on the concept of the noosphere as Teilhard proposed it.
I spell it.
There's Noosphere, Noosphere, and there's a couple different stories as to how it came about and where it came from,
Noosphere.
Noosphere, yeah. And he'll use the term also new Genesis, Genesis. He'll also talk about that, and so it comes from the Greek word nous, which is mind, and then sparia, which is sphere, and it is related to. It's related in his work to the looking at the spheres of the earth. And so first of all, in the one sphere you have the isosphere, and that the isosphere is all of the oh darn it, excuse me, we're having a bit of a problem here.
Are these words he's made up?
Not too much, really. The noosphere also has roots in Leroy and also in a Russian scientist. And so there's some discussion who got the idea first or used it first. Certainly the man who's developed it and given it the most push has been Teilhard. And so you'll have some information from the paperwork I've given you on that.
Oh, okay.
As we go along. Now,
is there a definition of noosphere?
Well, that's what I'm going to talk about for a moment and see if we can kind of come to an understanding of it anyway. And so I'm just going to take a few notes that I picked up from this paper and some of the things that Teilhard said for our starting point. My starting point is the fundamental initial fact that each one of us is pre-force linked by all material, organic and psychic strands to his being, to all that surrounds him. And that this unity, this connection goes back in time and forward in time, so that we're united not only to what's going on right now in the universe, but we're also united to its history and to its future. If we look far enough back in the depths of time, the disordered anthill of living beings suddenly, for an informed observer, arranges itself in long files that make their way by various paths towards greater consciousness. And of course that statement there gives you an awareness that he really tied evolution to consciousness. He affirms. Pardon?
What does that mean? Evolution to consciousness.
That you can chart evolution by charging the development of consciousness. More on that in a bit. He affirms the belief that there is an absolute direction to growth, to which both our duty and our happiness demand that we should conform. This is the function of the whole cosmic evolution, and it is, in other words, what he's really saying, another way of saying it is, this business of evolution is not whether you want to chip into it and buy into it or not. You are there, and it is. And he's saying that you really, in studying evolution, you're studying yourself, because it's who we are, and that ties us not only to the way in which we have come to this point as human beings, but also as a relationship to the whole of the cosmic universe. And so it's a grand view that he's got. He wrote in a book, in an essay called Humanization, he had said that this amounts to an imagining in one way or another above the animal biosphere a human sphere, a sphere of reflection, of conscious invention, of conscious souls, the noosphere. So the first really clear understanding of the noosphere is to realize that the isosphere is a way of looking at the sphere of the material world. Around that isosphere, in it, but also in a way of looking at it around it, is the biosphere. And the biosphere is all of life. Now, we fit into that biosphere, and yet we also go beyond it, because the next sphere that he then describes is the noosphere.
What is sphere?
Circle. A sphere is a globe.
I know that, but that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, the noosphere is a way of talking about the unity of all humankind's in thinking, and because of thinking and because of reflection, that there is just like in the biosphere, there's life in everything that lives, and there you can see the trees are in the biosphere, and the animals are in the biosphere, and the bacteria in the biosphere. Well, we are too, as so far as we have an origin within that, but we have more. We're in another sphere that he talks about, which is the noosphere, which surrounds the earth. He says he sees it as a much like our atmosphere. You don't see your atmosphere, but it's a zone that completely surrounds our earth. And so the same thing is true the way he envisions the noosphere. And so he maintains that evolution has a definite direction. He called it Eridan's thread. And obviously, Teilhard disagrees, maintaining that evolution has a direction, and Eridan's thread, as he calls it, that thread is the increasing complexity of living beings, and the focus of which is their nervous system, more precisely their brains. So he's talking about the fact that all of evolution begins with a breakout of life. But if you go back further than that, you can talk about the matter, the iosphere having consciousness in it, and it's seen by the way in which it comes to unity. There's a pull towards unity, even at the matter level. We also see that pull of unity in the biosphere, in animals, going towards unification. And it's on a couple different levels. One level is within its own species, but it's also then a unification that pushes it to a new species. There's a built-in unification kind of direction to that consciousness. When we get to us as self-reflective, that doesn't change. We still have that unification push and desire. We see it in making relationships. We see it in husband and wife and children coming from that. We see it in society wanting to come together. We see it as constantly a part of our very being, is this push for unification. And it's kind of curious that push is becoming so conscious or aware at the moment. We really have a huge awareness of unification happening to us, and that's due to information. And that gives us there's a change, and the change that is in life, that is undercurrent going through it, is thought. And thought is what makes us different than, thought defined as self-reflective thought, makes us different than that which is in the earth, in terms of the animals and things like that. He says, is evolution a theory, a system of hypothesis? It's much more. It is a general condition to which all theories and all hypotheses as systems must bow, and which they must satisfy henceforth if they are to be thinkable and true. Evolution is a light illuminating all facts, a curve that all lines must follow. And he's really when he talks about that kind of strong language about evolution, he's really giving us an insight to the fact that evolution is at the center of creation, at the center of existence. And it's, I've talked about this in the past a little bit, that even the very act of creation, properly seen and understood now, I see why it was the only way that divinity could create and get to the design that was intended, was through evolution. It wouldn't work to have created things already finished and complete and then have that try to get unified and pulled together. It won't happen. And I keep using that example of an AI robot, an artificial intelligent robot can be as bright or smarter than me, but it can't get unified with me. There's no way that I can become one with that machine. And that's what it would have been like had we just been plopped out created. But by having us in an evolutionary position from which divinity was involved from the very moment of creation to bringing it up, then that all is flowing outward toward the unity that is desired by divinity, and it's going to make it possible at a level that could never be done any other way. And so I see evolution not only as a handy theory, I see it as an absolute requirement of the way creation began to happen as designed by divinity. And that is a huge step to make. Because once you make that step, then you start saying, let's see now, evolution. Everything in evolution is in motion. There's nothing that's not moving. You say, wait a minute, those mountains look pretty secure. No, they're not. They're in motion. They're just not in a very fast motion, but they are in motion. And they come and they go. And they rise and they fall. And everything else is in motion. All of matter is in motion. And my goodness gracious, look at the motion that we've picked up on and we've gotten to in regard to in an atom. In just the motion that's a tremendous motion in that atom. And interrelationships that are going on all the time. And just because you can't feel it or see it doesn't mean it's not in motion. So, once you begin to understand evolution is life, is creation in motion. And so then you begin to have to say that you're going to connect the past and then you're going to connect the future, but you're also having to say that thinking is in motion. Now, that's obvious to us in one sense when you're learning, because you've got to go from step A to step B. But that's not so obvious when you begin to start talking about theories and positions of teaching, which are like blocks. And so those blocks, they've been defined, and therefore in school you learn those definitions of those blocks. And if you could recite those definitions back, you could get an A on your paper. But the problem with that is, truth itself is in motion. And if truth's in motion, we have got to be flexible to know what in the world's going on, or how to make sense of what's going on. Is that beginning to sink in a little bit?
I've got a question, and I haven't read that much of Sagan, but you talk about evolution drawing everything toward unity, and I think it was Carl Sagan was saying that the evolution is disintegrating.
Yes. Now, let me comment on that. Carl Sagan is not a whole person in his thinking. Okay, Carl Sagan is an outside thinker. He's looking at the outside and the science of it intensely and deeply. And if you are only going to look at the outside of creation, you will follow right to what Carl Sagan is saying by the very principle of thermodynamics. You will come to the point where energy is expended and all you have is motionless entropy of everything in that creation. There's no other place for it to go. The problem with that is Carl Sagan's not talking about inside and outside energy. He's not talking about a whole. He's talking only about one part of it. And if one part he's correct, that's where it goes to. That's the problem that science gets into. Science has all kinds of walls it runs into, and it doesn't know what to do with them. And that's one of the big ones, is that they don't know what to do with that. Well,
Do with what?
that fact that everything goes to entropy. Cardin points out that there are two forms of energy we're talking about, and we're trying to get into that one form right now by talking about the noosphere. The two forms are tangential energy and radial energy. And tangential energy is what I use to drive that bus down the road to the airport. It's tangential energy that's designed this cloth and these chairs. It's tangential energy that put it in here. It's tangential energy that explodes the gas and makes an engine run. It's tangential energy that is released by an atomic or a hydrogen bomb. That's all tangential energy. And the energy within the cells run around each other, that's tangential energy. But that's only one part of the energy system. And it's actually the smaller part, or the least part of the engine, in a way of speaking. The other energy is radial energy. It's the energy on the inside. And Teilhard would make a comment that all energy it begins or finds its meaning or comes from the psychic. Now, that sounds kind of strange because we don't think about the psyche being the spirit being that strong or that powerful. But factually, when you understand that creation has got two aspects, matter and spirit, and they're both together all the time. They're never separated, in fact. They're always together. What happens is that spirit is a direct connection back to the very spirit of divinity. And so that's psychic as can be. That's where all the energy comes from, is divinity. But the way it's developed in evolution by the mystery and the wonderment of divinity is this connection, and so then they start pulsing. And it turns out, and Teilhard shows it in some degree of direction, I don't have it right in front of me, when he talks about the fact that tangential energy pulses over to the inside of things, which increases the psychic, or the spirit energy. The psychic energy increases. And then it pulses back over to the tangential, it increases the energy in the tangential. So that the two of them pulsing together are a constant increase of energy. And that constant increase of energy says that things won't become energyless, and entropy is not going to be what this universe is going to end up in. Now I understand that I'm not a physicist.
What does entropy mean?
Absolute motionlessness.
Motionless.
Absolutely no energy. It's just matter sitting there, whether it's in a vacuum or in gravity, but it's just there, but there's not any movement, and there can't be any movement. It is expended all of its energy. Well,
like what? What would be an example?
It isn't real. I can't give you an example of it. It never happens yet. That's a theory that they said that's where it would go to. Well, that's because Sagan and the scientists haven't looked at the whole picture. Now, I hate to be pounding on this too hard, but I got to tell you, Teilhard de Chardin has given us great insight. But when people deal with him, they'll start missing a couple of his principles, and then they'll take off and get over here into a zone they can't get answers for because they didn't keep all of them together. And this business of the dual position of reality, that it's both matter and spirit, that is critical to keep that in mind and keep it there, because it's always there. Spirit and matter are busy in this chair, in anything. And in animals we see it more clearly because the spirit's condensing, we got more consciousness. In us we see it even more, and we saw it so well that there was a whole historical for centuries teaching that all this matter that puts up with me is in my way, and it's really not good. And that's the whole problem of many theories that run through history in terms of religion and philosophy, is that the whole purpose of everything is to get out of this body so I can get on with being my spirit. That's really misunderstanding who and what I am. I am that spirit and flesh combination. And that pulsating is going on with me. And when you allow it to happen, you will find yourself full of life, full of energy, and full of drive and passion. And it'll actually change your bodies to where the bodies are working better. There's the old story of, and I never remember his name, but the Hollywood guy who was going to die, and so he thought, well, he might as well laugh if he's going to die. So he went and collected all the movies that were available up to that time, and this is back in the 1900s sometime, of comedies and that sort of thing. And he got all in, watched them, laughed himself, laughed and enjoyed it, and the cancer went away, and he lived a long time. What was he doing? He was driving out psychic energy in that laughter, inside spirit energy. And what did it do? It renewed his body. You know, and it's not complicated. If you want to get somebody dead, just get them so that they don't have any psychic energy, and they'll up and die on you. And the other side is equally true. You get somebody who gets alive with something, starts going, goodness gracious, their energy changes, their ability to do and function changes. So, I'm trying to politely say that one of the things to do with Teilhard you have to do, and to keep out of areas that get all crazy, is to keep his principles in mind so that you don't lose any of them. Now I want to get this psychic energy over to the noosphere, to this sphere that surrounds the earth. And I want to talk about that because it's real and it's there, and you are touching it and you don't even know you're touching it. Let me give some examples of when it touches and it gets into you. Have you ever heard the story of twins who get close and are psychically close to each other because they started being close in the womb and they made connection, and you know, and it's funny with children. Do you ever see children develop their own language? You know, and you got to have one of them translate for the else what the other one's saying, and they develop a whole thing because they're communicating so much. Well, twins, and especially if they're what's the right word? Maternal, huh? Identical twins, then they're really close because their DNAs are so close. And so they grow up close, they go through life, and they have a lot of things that happen. They have birthdays together, and they have friends, and all these things are part of it. And they take separate jobs, and one of them's in China, and one of them's in New York. And both of them have an idea that hits them at the same time. And it happens all the time with twins. And they can be a complete opposite of the earth, and they do it. And we do it in a lesser way all the time. You get a husband and wife that really are coming together and
Simpatico.
Yeah, the simpatico is really happening. They start thinking alike, and I will go further than that. They'll even start looking alike.
And finish sentences.
And finish their sentences, or somebody will say, yeah, I was thinking about that yesterday, and I got this, yeah, well, let's do this. You know, and they don't even think about it. That's all part of Noosphere operation. The knowledge, the fact of all that understanding gets into a sphere. Now, Teilhard's going to say some strange things about that. He thinks in the evolutionary process, and I have some evidence that he's right, that noosphere is going to become self-reflective in itself. Now that's kind of out there in a ways. But he's saying that the condensation of psychic energy with knowledge in it, within the confines and the development of that, is going to get to the point where that noosphere itself will be self-reflective. Now, when he talks about that, oftentimes he'll push that out into the area of the omega, which is the huge evolutionary concept that humankind is getting ready for and
Well,
getting in place for.
I don't know what that means. Noosphere is self-reflective. Now,
Well, that would mean that Noosphere can think. Noosphere can know that it knows. And he maintains that we're going to be so much a part of it and so deeply embedded in it. Now, let's talk about what that means a little bit so that we can begin to understand how that might just work. And of course, what he saw information as being the base of this, and the communication of information of this, the housing and communication of information is critical to this idea of the development of the noosphere. So, you go back in history, and the first time we got some information and we stored it, how'd they do it? They chipped it in the rock. You know, and my scripture professor would pull out of his pocket a cuneiform tablet. It looked like a cone. It'd be about so big and round and went down to kind of a point, and it had writing all over it. And he'd start reading the silly thing. I mean, he learned the language. That's stored language. That's stored information. And well, that's pretty awesome. So then pretty soon they figured out that was a little heavy to carry around. And besides that, somebody figured out you could take and scratch something with this liquid or whatever they figured it out with, and it stayed on the page, and they found that papyrus and leather and other things could handle this. They start writing on things. And we have storage of energy in a whole different new way. And very important development. Those developments will form the basis to the coming together of those peoples in those areas. Now, sometimes it's in war, and sometimes it's in greed to possess and all those kind of things, but it's really pushing them together. That information is really causing unity to happen. And now they can start remembering and saying, okay, we make a treaty, we're going to put it over here, and then we can read it in the temple every year, and you will pay attention to it because it'll be, and so everybody's reading the same rules and the same things. I mean,
it's also created disunity.
Huh?
Communication and language has also created disunity.
Yes, well, it does, but if you look past the up and down of things, the pulse of increase and decrease, and that's going to be there.
And that's part of the growth too.
That's part of the growth, but that process, if you look at that, you can say it was doing this, and now it's doing this, and now it's doing this. In other words, it's getting bigger and heavier all the time. The next major point of getting things together and information stored was to make libraries out of books and out of scrolls, first of all. And so Alexandria had one of the most important libraries in the early world, and they burned it down. And so all that information was lost, and it had to be recovered and put together again. But yet it doesn't get lost entirely, because it gets also in the head of people, and then they can redo it. Now wait a minute, that head, getting it in the head and redoing it, now we're talking about some more noosphere reality. See, because information will then eventually find situation within the noosphere. Now, if you keep pushing on this thing, and you start saying, okay, that happened, now what do we do? Well, the next thing, one of the things happened is my dad had a wire recorder, for Pete's sakes. And this little thin wire would hold all the conversations with the family, and somebody singing, and all that stuff was on there. That got to be delicate and hard to handle, so then they figured out they could put it on a piece of film. And so all of a sudden now we got the little reel-to-reel type stuff, whether it's reel-to-reel in the big size or the little size, and then we made it smaller and better, and it's 8-track, and then it's 4-track, and all that's information storage. Well, Teilhard saw that, and he saw it developing, and he talked about it getting stronger and better. And he really was talking about the beginning of the internet. Because now all of a sudden, we are now storing, and this, I always like this leap, we're now storing information in light. That's what the computer does. It stores it in light. And it works. You say, well, it's electricity, yeah, but that's light. That's wavelength. And I'm not kidding you. Now, I can tell you experiments that I knew about years ago that they took this crystal, because it's a good storage unit, and they found that out, that you could store this information and bunches of it in there. So they figured it out how to do this better and better. And so they and I can't remember the sizes of these things because they're huge numbers, but they decided that they could take this crystal and they could put into it light pulses of information, and not tiny bits. I mean, on one of these kind of light things they're doing here, and that crystal maybe the size of a marble or the size of your thumb, they could put the Encyclopedia Britannica, all of it, in there. But they found out if they changed the light and went from a red light to a green light, they could do it again. And they could put as much in there as they had before in the one, and it held it all. And they could take it out without it getting disorganized. I mean, you know, you start looking at this thing. They're talking about now that we're going to get down to this business of storage and light, storage and this kind of thing, into a grain of sand that will hold a library. I mean, it just absolutely gets phenomenal. Now, so as we begin to see this information thing just really growing, then that information, when it gets into certain levels, and it's got a lot to do with our ability to understand it, to verify it, and to agree with it, and to put a spiritual overlook on it, it gets into the noosphere. Now,
Leading to the crystal sphere, right?
huh?
Leading to the crystal sphere.
No, the crystal sphere would be much smaller.
I thought it goes like this, to the
No.
crystal sphere, omega sphere.
No, that part there, that may be true, but he likes to think in terms of spheres, and so his penetration and his omega is going to be a sphere, guaranteed. You know, it's going to be another. But anyway, that's a little bit of just visualization. Factually, that then all this information, and you start looking at information between the beginning of the gospel years in 2000 to 1600. The information in the earth doubled. Okay? It went from 1600 to, I think, 1850 or something else, and it doubled again. It went from 1850 or something to maybe early 1900, and it doubled. Right now, information in the earth is doubling every month. It just absolutely blows your mind. What's it doing? Is it just getting into computers and sitting there? No. This stuff gets active. This is psychic energy. What's it doing? It's getting into this noosphere. And this noosphere gets more and more knowledge and more active and more going on. Now, let me tell you another place where the noosphere shows up so that you can kind of get a hold of this. And it shows up in inventions. It's a real simple equation. If somebody gets an idea for an invention and they make a breakthrough, they intellectually have a spark that hits them, and they see something new that's going to work that somebody didn't know before, they better do something with it if they want to. Because if they don't, it's going to show up over here, and the next guy down the road is going to have it, or in another country. And it's going to be like that. My father used to make inventions for his work in the mechanics of building and repairing big trucks. And I remember one he made. He hung a thing on a front tire of a truck and made a shelf he could stand on so he could get up there and work on that engine. And he just fabricated it, saw it, looked at it, and he made it. He did it. And pretty soon, a year or two later, here was somebody selling these things. And I don't have any reason to think they came to Craig and saw his, but they got to the same place. And my father had something that was really lovely. Understand, he didn't put it in this language, but he said everybody's got a good idea, no matter who they are. Well, what's he really saying? everybody has access to the noosphere, no matter who they are. And they can have a brilliant idea or a good idea. So he used this example. Frank was kind of a dullard, kind of pretty slow. And he worked in the business they were in at the dock. And the dock workers were hustling big sacks of gilsonite and all kinds of crazy stuff. They put down oil wells and getting pipes on trucks. And, you know, there was the slave labor of that operation with these guys. And they didn't get paid great, but they got a job, and Frank did his job. But he always got razzed about it because, you know, he was, people are like children, they persecute or prosecute somebody who's not got so smart. Well, these dock hands were kind of like that. And so they were always kind of razzing Frank a little bit. And Dad had to do some things. And so he looked at what was available, and he said, instead of buying a trailer that'll carry our pipe in a semi, I'll make one. Oh, okay, if you can do that, Vince, go ahead. Well, he did. And he got to where he was making trailers really good and strong, and they did their job. And so, but he had a problem. The feet, and I forgot what he called them, but the feet that you put down so that it would stay upright when you pull the truck out underneath was real hard to figure out how to get it to work right, and it would get ice in it, or it would not be quite square, it'd be this or that, and this would be a problem. And so he was pondering all this, and one day he went into the little lunchroom where they had a coffee in the middle of the day, a donut and coffee in the middle of the day, and there the dock hands are in there, and Dad's talking about this problem he's having with his trailer. Frank says, I know how to do it. Well, everybody laughed at him. Frank don't know how to do anything. Who are you kidding, Frank? Dad just didn't say a thing. Everybody left and went back to work, and Dad went and got Frank. He said, Frank, come here. Show me what you got in mind. He never did any more feet except Frank's idea. It was so perfect. It worked beautifully.
Nobody got a patent.
No. And nobody honored Frank. It's just that my dad knew that anybody could have something worth listening to. And that is tapping into the noosphere. That is part of what it means that this information, knowledge, and a whole business of intelligence is more available to us all the time. Boy, and you can see this in some young children who learn something quickly and who go fast towards something in whatever it is that they're working on. It might be language, it might be different things, but boy, they can get in a hurry absorbing something sometimes. And things that I studied with and really worked on. I mean, I had the hardest time figuring out the cybersphere, cyberspace. They got talking about it. You know, these whipsnapper sixth graders were getting it immediately and understood it, and then said, "Oh yeah, I got it. Yeah, okay." You know, so I'm just trying to show you some of the extent of this thing on the noosphere. Now, let me talk a little bit about how it can become a problem. In studying the noosphere and all this paper I got in front of me here, I reading and studying and looking on this, boy, there is an interest and an extensive, large explosion of people working on the concept of the noosphere. A lot of scientists are working with a lot of people that are in areas of human thinking and projections and whatnot, and you know, and they're being pushed along by guys like Young pushed on the same concepts. He was a contemporary of Cardin, by the way, and he pushed on a lot of things in thinking and in the way a person's thinking, how it works. And I've got a couple papers that talk about his parallel kind of development. What's going on? Noosphere is working. Cardin's getting part of it, and Young was getting part of it in a lot of a different kind of way, and all that was getting stronger and better. Well, so anyway, so I kept chasing some of these, and so give you an example of what I ran into. I ran into this guy who really had some touch into Teilhard, and he had a bunch of other things in his life. So he started adding his parts into it. And pretty soon, before too long, he's off in developing the noosphere, looking at the Mayan calendars and talking about how the Mayan calendars are accurate to this and doing this and very important to that. You know, you look at that and you think, well, how in the world is all that coming from? Because there's ability to reach into the noosphere. And the Mayans were touching into the noosphere. They were part of that. And so he's all of a sudden pulling this back out and relating again. Now, the problem we run into is people oftentimes will do that with Cardin, but they'll get off track. And why do they get off track? Because they forget something. It's just like what I think Carl Sagan, I don't know if he studied Teilhard. I don't know that he did. But I know one thing, he didn't get it in terms of the inside of things. And so that's where that problem comes up. So you have that all the time shows up. If somebody gets off into noosphere and this development of the thinking ability of the planet being a sphere that we can touch into that's more than just in somebody's head and not even in libraries, it's more than that. But then you get somebody off a little track that forgets one item. The core place of love in spirit in Teilhard. Teilhard always goes back to love as the core central thing. Well, look at that. Isn't love absolutely at the core center of psychic energy and psychic direction? I mean, it's so foundational to the very nature of divinity, love is. And love is so foundational to the nature and the place within the whole of evolution that if you lose track of that love aspect and you start chasing down an evolution direction, you get into all kinds of problems because all of a sudden you're now on your head using stuff and you're not getting the spirit because the spirit is a spirit of love and you're not getting fed by the things that need to balance off, and pretty soon you get some really weird philosophies and some really weird theologies and some really weird theories of science that don't make any sense because they forgot to look at love and forgot to keep love in their picture. And that's a chore. That takes a dedicated process to do that. That's not necessarily easy to keep that focus in mind. Another one that is missed within Teilhard. Love, inside, outside, those two things are the outside and inside of things. Here's another one. Teilhard, I never saw anybody in their language or in their work ever develop as often as he does the reduction of duality into singularity. And so you have a duality of science and a duality of religion. You have the two in duality. And he just absolutely says they got to be together or you're never going to get either one of them right. Well, here's another duality. You got God over here and me over here. God over there and me over here. And as soon as you do that, boy, do you get into problems. I listened to a sermon Sunday. Fine preacher, obviously knew his scriptures, had done a lot of study, and was probably an older man talking. And he was so crazily mixed up because he took all of the truth and had it in a box, and it was all based on a God over there concept and us over here. And I sat there and listened to him and I thought, my goodness, a few years ago I was teaching like that. A few years ago that's what I thought. And I'm saying, my, now I can't even think like that. Because I'm seeing that's not accurate. That's not where truth is at. And so what happens? I've seen it happen 2 or 3 times with Teilhard and commentators and writers about him. They come along and they establish a little duality thing over here. And pretty soon that they keep pushing on that. And then pretty soon they're looking at Teilhard from the point of view of that duality and they're criticizing him. And they're saying he's got this wrong and that's wrong and this is wrong.
Can you give an example of a duality?
Well, God out here and God in here. What's some more dualities that are common? They're all over the place. And it's hard to get rid of them because we think in dualities very often, separated things. science and religion, science and religion are certainly one of the prime dualities, and a lot of, but there's a lot of philosophers that are very dualistic, and there are some philosophers who are beginning to see the need to be singular, and one of the ancient Greek philosophers said that clearly, said that you can't talk about things being multiples like that. You've got to talk about them as singularities. And nobody listened to him for a few centuries. And so it
If you take a duality of religion and science, how do you get singularity?
By putting the two together and always doing your development of thinking for that by pulsing off both of them. Always. Now let's see if I can give you a simple one so that I can make a little.
Well, how does it result into a unity?
Yeah, I'm just trying to give you an example. I've got a couple in mind.
They don't have to contradict.
They don't give up their own thinking. They don't give up their own positions, but they also don't judge. Now, I'm going to stop here for a moment and make a comment about Teilhard. If Teilhard, there's a certain group of people that want to get him classified as a saint within the Catholic Church. Okay, fine. I can give you one thing about his person that's enough reason to give him a title of saint. One item. He never, and I can find any place, made a judgment against anyone or anything. He was not judgmental at all. The only way you can stay out of being judgmental is you've got to be unified. See, if I'm going to be judgmental against you, because after all, you're a woman, and I'm going to, whatever I use as the excuse for being judgmental, I'm setting up a problem. Hey, you're part of me and I'm part of you, and all of a sudden we're one. I'm not going to judge you. It's just that simple. But he never judged anybody. I can't find any judgmental writing in him. And I think, man, what a dedicated insight he had to love and to meaning in life by never being judgmental.
Well, and supposedly with all the problems he had with the
Catholic all
Church,
the opposition he had from the church system, and he never judged him. And he never gets into a judgmental position to it. He got hurt, and he would be pained, and you could feel his suffering, you could feel his isolation, you could feel his depression, but not judgmental. I look at that and I think, wow. I mean, just listen to the news. Just listen to the people giving political speeches. Just listen to movies and everything else, and look at the judgmental stuff that's in everything. Whew. Anyway, so now let's see if we can pursue a little bit. I want to give you. I'm looking for. Well, here's one for you. If medicine, let's take drugs in the sense of the drug cartel, the drugs that are the pharmaceutical drugs. If those people have worked on the outside and they've worked on the symptoms, all right. I'm over here from the ministry point of view, working on causes, not symptoms. And I'm also, because I'm working on this ministry point of view, I'm working on the inside. I'm looking for inside things all the time. If that dualism between, in the drug world, was stopped just in the dualism they have between inside and outside in that one place, it would completely change our drug practices. For one thing, we would be looking for causal healing with drugs, not symptomatic treatment. Why is symptomatic treatment the way that it's done? It's very financially stable. If I can get you to take a bunch of pills to handle your symptoms, guess what? You're not going to get rid of them, so you're going to take my pills for a very long time. Okay? And so you have a very simple thing, whereas if you got somebody on the inside of things saying, hey, we need to talk about this, we wouldn't have the crazy, wild side effects from these drugs. I mean, it just blows my mind when I'm listening to the TV or the radio and they start listing all the side effects of this particular thing, and I'm saying, who in the world in their right mind is going to take that? Well, it might help. There's something. I have a twitch over here. and then what's it doing to everything else in you? See, that's not inside, that's not together, that's not pulsing back and forth. We would do the same thing in sports or in politics or in anything. If we could get the inside and the outside to pulse back and get together again, we get a whole different world of education. Montessori, bless her beginnings, because she did that. She brings creativity and spirit kind of things into educating things over here, and she winds up with an entirely different education system and produces an entirely different kind of human in the world. So there's a lot of examples of this. But what I would like to do, and I'm going to make a statement, and I'm going to give you some examples of it, and I probably will turn because it's going to be too hard to do on the video, but I'm going to tell you what I suspect. I do a lot of work in subtle energy processes, and subtle energy processes can be very effective in healing and health and helpful to all kinds of ways. And I think that the subtle energy frequencies may well be embedded in the noosphere, because I found out that the subtle energy frequencies are not contained in space and time. I can do a whole lot of things to show you this, how that it's not contained in space and time. Would you like to see that?
Mm-hmm. Turn off the camera.
We are going to turn just exactly that. We're going to